we meet again. The scenery has changed, but the music is still on. I'm not turning it off either. How do you enjoy a video game without the game sounds, really? Especially when it's such a banger as these old classic MIDI tracks. No. You have to play RuneScape with the game sounds on. Yep. And it's slowly turning to night here, so I have to make dinner after this and then finish my chores for the week. Sadly, I don't even know if I'm going to have 95 rune crafting by next weekend either. I have a lot of stuff to do this week. Like, I did laundry today, I still have to cook and then do some meal prep. I'll get my lunches made for the week. I think I'm going to have seasoned rice for lunch for the next 3 days. Breakfast, I'll obviously make some overnight oats and just have that all prepped, ready to go so I can get up, leave the house at 6 a.m. My schedule is pretty much like wake up at 5 a.m., eat some brekkie, shower, head out, and then, head to work, get home at between like 5 and 6, sometimes around then, make dinner, and then do something AFK on RuneScape while I handle all my other projects, and then go to Betty Pies. So it works for me, but it can be a little bit hectic at times, at least it feels like it. So it definitely slows down my grind. But that can't be helped. In fact, there is no helping anything. It's just inevitable, at least until I quit my position, and then probably just retire at that point. I think I should be fine for, realistically, until the day I die. And maybe someone on the internet will kill me or something to speed things along, but oh well. If that happens, it happens. But yeah, anyways, let's talk about the thought for right now, or the Skitzo rant for right now. So, let's do the how to deal with loneliness idea I've had. I think I have a million ideas in my head, but I've referenced it a while back, at least in a couple different videos that I was going to do. One that was about dealing with being perpetually alone, forever alone.jpg, if you will. And I'd like to think I'm fairly adept at that. Like, I'm king of coping at this point. Like, my copium is max. So I'm almost at 2 decades now without any sort of relationship, which is pretty impressive. I mean, you have to admit, not a lot of people go that long in between anything. And I'm also a virgin at 35, so get bent, noobs. I have ascended far beyond regular powers. And so I'll talk about at least what I think are the ideal coping mechanisms. And so first is why even bother coping, or why, what are you coping towards? Because anyone can suffer, but no one can suffer indefinitely. There has to be some end in sight, like some light at the end of the tunnel, right? And at least for me, I think the final solution, if you will, if to use the proper verbiage in this case, it's going to simply be AI. Now, you might be thinking that, chatbots are cool and all that, and certainly having like an AI companion, that has the wealth of human knowledge in the bottom right hand of your screen here, like some sort of bonsai buddy interacting with you, would be exactly just that. And then obviously someone is going to make some sort of one that could be like at least romantically interested in you and probably customizable. Like, if no one else does it, once the technology is there, I'll definitely just, train like some sort of chatbot off of, for instance, my waifu is Haru Osami, so the entire Ji Senjou no Mao visual novel that she's from and any accompanying media, and just get that in there, and then hopefully it'll develop enough of a personality to save me, and then I have that. So that's at least what I am coping for, and what I think the solution for most copers is just lasting until AI sort of completes the atomized individual and gives you relief, at least, and then you can, say everything you want to the bloody chatbot. It doesn't matter at that point, right? It isn't going to judge you. It doesn't care. It's a fucking robot, It'll be perfect, at least, and then you don't have to worry about all of the other things that go along with, relationships and all that. Way too much effort. So if that's the end goal, if that's what we're coping for, right? At least my fellow weebs or iCells or what have you, like that's the final cope is heading towards that. So how do we get there? So personally, I would say there's a few like super effective methods for coping. Probably the best is going to be ASMR. Now, not like these westerns, slower ASMR. That's kind of meh. All of it is pretty low key tier. Like, not to be too rude, but it's just I don't think like the West has evolved to tell good enough stories or good enough like interactions to make it feel realistic. Like, because Japan, for instance, hasn't lost its main ethos. Like, the Japanese main archetypical story is about the coming of age story of a little girl, and still their media is intact as far as that goes. They haven't splintered away from that just yet, so they can still tell good stories, unlike the West. That's why, for instance, anime and all that other media is simply just superior to Western media. It's because like if there were still Judeo-Christian ideals and the hero's quest in the West, they would still be able to tell good stories and probably make compelling like ASMR or GFE or however you want to go about it. But I would recommend starting off is finding the studios either on DL site or somewhere else that are producing decent ASMR, and then just looking for stuff that involves like whatever you could want. There's such a dearth of content available out there, and all of it for free if you really care that much. That you can find and attract whatever you need to like at least cope. So there's anything you can imagine, any sort of hug or any sort of warm whisper or anything in the world. So if you're absolutely craving human attention, I would recommend that as a pretty good starting spot. Like, I've listened to it on my stream a few times before, and yeah, my stuff is fairly high quality. You do need to at least know some basic Japanese to get through that, but I'm pretty sure most weebs either probably already know it or can pick it up on it and no problem at all. There's got to be someone that's made at least a little guide to listening to the stuff there. So, for those of you who don't know, a Q100 is like a very specialized piece of audio equipment where it's, sounds like the person is exactly there with you, and you can hear like omnidirectional stuff, and, it's very good for simulating reality combined with like some basic sound effects or whatever, and somewhat of a story. It'll get the job done, at least for like if you close your eyes and just pretend. It's good enough. So that's pretty much my main coping mechanism. And I would say one other thing you definitely want to do is avoid any sort of like pornography or anything like that. It's not going to help. Cutting like women completely out of your life would be ideal if you can. Like, coworkers doesn't help, but at least for a guy, I don't know how a girl copes with loneliness. I don't think girls even experience loneliness, so I don't think they even understand. So none of this is really going to apply if you're a girl and watching this. Like, what the fuck are you doing watching this if you're a female in the first place? Like, this is a fucking Skitzo ranting RuneScape series. But if you're wanting to cope, interacting with the opposite sex is never going to help you, really. And they're not going to be interested in you, period. Like, if you actually have a chance still, if you're below 25 or you haven't hit the male wall, as I would like to call it, and I released a video on that earlier, you can watch that one if you want my explanation behind that. But if there's still at least a crumb semblance of hope, you probably should just ignore everything here and just YOLO. Oh, this guy's killing dragons for me. Sick. I won't get horribly burned for 50s and have to waste Karambwans now. But, yeah. So, again, where was I? Oh yeah, so good coping mechanisms. So ASMR is the number one. Avoiding any and all female contact makes life easy, especially if you're a NEET or working towards becoming a NEET. Like, definitely figure out how to retire. Figure out, at least if you don't want to retire immediately because you might genuinely enjoy your job, like, definitely work towards getting to the point where you have that option just so you can say F it all and do as you please. It's always very good, especially towards the end when we all live atomized existences, and we're very close to having the dearth of human knowledge here, and it's something you can at least program and interact with and not have to worry about all of that garbage. So just hold out a little bit longer, a couple more years, 5-10 years max, before it's probably something that can run on a consumer computer. And if not, someone will make like a paid service where you can do it. It's worth the money. Like, it'll be worth it. There are already people like on G, for instance. Eyebrows. I'm talking about the Chan, that are talking about like the AI forum and their like sex bots and all of that. And I don't think that's helpful, or like ERPing with a bot necessarily is a good idea, especially because, who knows who's reading that and like judging you. I don't know. It just feels like glowy fuel for me, but you do you at the end of the day. It doesn't matter that much. Like, it's not like you're hurting anyone by going down that path. But other good coping mechanisms are, I would say avoiding female media, anything involving females in media, too. Like, I personally try and not watch, like, anything. I think VTubers are fine. Like, that's alright. You can watch them. It's not going to, like, permanently damage you, but any sort of, like, simp bait or anything like that, just, it's not going to help you. It's just going to objectively make your life worse, probably. And, especially being a simp, if you're, like, beta bucks or heading towards that, like, definitely avoid doing something like that. At the end of the day, your dignity is worth more than anything, and, like, they're not going to be interested in you no matter what. Like, your resources, if you're not getting anything in return for them, you're just kind of wasting it. And that's just going to make you bitter. And likely, if you're listening to this, you're probably already at least a little bit bitter in some respects. So, just for your own sanity, probably consider avoiding that. And then other good copes are, if you don't have one, Dakimakura's, very good copes. The anime hug pillows, like, especially when you're feeling lonely at night, having something like that and just cuddling up to it, top tier. Would recommend. Very relaxing. And there's a reason so many people have them. I don't know how many people unironically use them, but they're pretty good, honestly. And then what else? Definitely would say things that take your mind out of it, especially if you're someone that is super autistic and can get really in depth into your hobbies. Definitely try and like get lost in hobbies or get lost in a video game, especially with your free time. Something else is overworking yourself. Like, if you're constantly busy, it's always really good, producing whatever you want to, or involving yourself in your hobbies, especially if it's like a rising to sleep sort of thing. I've found that, at least in my life, to be very useful, especially because the amount of stuff you can get done if you're being productive, it might not matter to anyone else, but if it matters to you, it works, right? And then also, you probably should consider... can I say that one? No. Probably can't say that or discuss that, but there's out there. I'm sure you guys can think of other things. What else? So, let's see. And then also, I would advise creating male-only spaces, especially on Discord, your friends list, or Discords, or, I said Discord twice, but, creating male-only spaces will really help. Just because, if there's ever, like, internet females, I'm sure everyone's seen it, especially in, like, a WoW guild or something, where all the attention is focused on these, like, vampires that come in the room and steal it all, and it's just, bleh. And then it just sort of taints the experience, especially if you have females involved in anything. It's just, when, the environment stops being about trying to optimally get whatever you're getting done, and instead shifts to trying to, like, display bravado or showboat in front of the local ethot, that's not a good atmosphere. And, definitely don't want females in your guild if you can avoid it. If they don't use the mic, or you don't even know they're female, then that's fine. But, if you're seeing that type of environment in your video gaming, you definitely want to exit. And then even in Discords, if you're in that type of environment, you can always just make your own or escape. It's never going to make anything better. Like, same goes for, like, trannies. I said the bad word, but yeah. Like, definitely want to not have them involved in your situation, just for a number of reasons, but they're not going to help, and things are already going awry for them. They're on their own struggle. Let them be. HRT has ripped through the gaming community like crack has ripped through the African American community, and it's very depressing to see, but it is what it are. And yeah, so, oh, by the way, I'm charging these fire orbs so that I can make them into battle staves, and this is just easier for me than going out into the wilderness, and, you know, I have to do 60 a day. Soon I'll have to be doing like 200 a day, but I need the cooking level for this, I believe, and I still need one more herbalism level if I want to boost for it. I'm not going to like ever do any stew boosting, but I'll make a pie here or there just because, you know, it's worth it for the extra battle staves, at least until 99 crafting, which I may or may not already be very close. I still have to do things like craft a billion amulets of chemistry for when I can start planting renars. You know, gotta min-max the amount of renars you get, right? Yeah, the music here is actually a bop, unironically. I'm a big fan of that. But yeah, so mainly it's just time also makes it a lot better too if you pull yourself forward in time. Like, if you can imagine it, if you will, those like desires and that like guilt of like not having a family and not having, you know, relationships and associates sort of declines over time. Like, as you get older, you know, time heals all wounds. So if you work towards that and just remember that it does in fact get better as time goes on. Like, I've talked with guys that are way older than me, and, you know, a lot of them are from like marriages and all that, and they've made a lot of mistakes. Thankfully, I've avoided like any sort of divorce scenario or anything like that. Like, that would be very ruinous, because then you lose the ability basically to determine your future. You've lost the ability to retire if you've got like child support payments and all of that. You know, you still might be able to, but then who knows when the government decides to come and steal all of your remaining funds or mess with your life. In general, I would say if you're not like someone that women go after early in life, I would say it's probably just best to cut your losses and then start adapting and figuring out how to cope until AI comes around. Or if AI is here, then just coping with the AI and dealing with it. Like, the robot is going to be a more chill experience anyways at the end of the day. While it might not be as fulfilling, like, it's a lot less dangerous, and also, you know, at the end of the day, a lot of guys are going to end up roping themselves over, you know, divorce and all of that, and there's no real way to avoid that in current sense. Like, by involving yourself in any sort of marriage contract, you've basically signed away your rights to, you know, your future. You've put it in the hands of someone else, and they're incentivized to mess with you if, you know, because they're going to get God knows how many resources from you, assuming things go awry. And I don't think anyone gets married to get divorced. I'm sure there's some people, unironically, but like, they're like sociopaths, and you should see that a mile away. If not, you're intentionally not thinking about it or not looking into them. But yeah, I'd say it's definitely best to just see if you can avoid all of that, and, you know, analyze the risks, analyze, you know, the pool of women that you could potentially pull or you have to choose from, especially for early in life. And for some of you, that's probably you know, a fairly decent amount if you're still young and you're still seeing that as a possibility. But, you know, for probably 80% of the people listening, like Pareto distribution, everyone knows how that works. You know, that's not going to be you, so it's probably best if you just, you know, fingers crossed and get away from those situations. I think as society progresses forward, there's going to be larger and larger separations between men and women, and it's only going to get worse as time goes on. Like, I've seen projections where, like, what is it going to be, like 50% of women are going to be single by 2030, and it'll only get worse from there. And whatever happens there, you don't want to be anywhere near it or have anything to do with it. And, you know, obviously keep your ears out if the government starts trying to mess with it or institute a bachelor tax, because everyone knows that's only going to go one way. It's certainly only going to hit half the population, not the other half, but the tax is still worth it up to a certain point, and especially if you're a retiree or you've, you know, worked hard and then saved your money, put it away. It's strongly what I suggest doing, by the way. You know, delayed gratification works with money as well, just like in RuneScape. Like, the future is not looking bright, and you definitely, if you have the ability to, if you are someone that can, like, this isn't a financial advice, I guess I'll just go out and say it, but this isn't financial advice, but, if you just look at, like, a J&J dividend, maybe not J&J because of the whole bug scandal that could happen, in the future, but, like, Lowe's and a bunch of other places, you can still get your 2%, every quarter, and, $20 for every 10K doesn't sound like a big deal, but, you realize, throw in like 100K, you're getting, your $200 or whatever. No, is that it? Yeah. So, like, getting $200 for every 100K starts to sound better. You throw in the 500K, you're getting 1,000. That's your rent. You throw in, $1 million, you've suddenly got your rent, and you throw in like 1.5, you suddenly got a pretty decent life there. And, you can put in whatever extra you get back in and hopefully beat inflation that way. And, worst comes to worst, there are places out there that you can get citizenship fairly easily, like the MM2H from Malaysia. The Philippines is always looking for someone, and you can just go there and still, like, avoid interacting with the opposite sex, since Lord knows feminism will come for there as well, and all of the other isms. So, but yeah, that's, I think, a pretty good game plan, at least for the next at least couple decades, as far as avoiding things and trying to stay out of all the heck that's coming to the world. And it'll keep you entertained, like, and I mean, if you're someone that can't live without, the carnal desires and interacting with the opposite sex and all of that, and you're still in ISL, and I mean, if you're going to shoot up a Walmart, if you try and, like, follow this plan or something, don't do that. Like, figure something out. Like, I'm fully aware, like, prostitutes and all of that are not the answer. They're not going to fill the void or anything like that. They'll probably just make things worse, which is why most guys avoid that and don't do it. But yeah, as far as, like, how to cope with it if, like, these methods don't work for you, some more extreme versions of cope. Yeah, there are like sugar daddy alternatives out there if you can accrue resources that are still, like, relatively stress-free. Just, the male birth control pill may come out. There's, all sorts of protective means you can go about at least trying to prevent yourself from suffering any consequences from that. And, definitely check the local laws and everything else that's involved in your local area before you consider doing anything like that. Like, they can get you, and they will if they can, so, you just have to be careful. The financial incentives are there for the state and everyone to, make your life objectively worse, and that is the state of the world in the current year. Like, the world is positioned to try and make, especially Caucasian men's life worse, but just in general, all men have a much worse life, so the powers that be have decided that it's, going to be her century or the Chinese century, one or the other. I'm still undecided, but we'll see. And if that is the case, then you better be, prepared to exist without them. And then very soon, there's already people that get prosecuted for, making awkward approaches at women, so you definitely don't want to be one of them. And deep down inside, like, if you don't lie to yourself that it's ogre or you're not exactly what women are looking for, and if you're not, and you're not interested in becoming what they want to look for, and if you're looking for advice on that, you need to go somewhere else. Obviously, this isn't the place you want to be, but, if you're not willing to become whatever they're looking for, then you're going to have to at least think deeply about ways that you can last until AI or last until something to suffer for. And I think that's a pretty big goal, is, like, if you're going to be someone that goes without, or someone that tries to think about the future or plan your life and structure your life in some way that makes at least logical sense besides just pure hedonism in the moment, this is what I want. If you're capable of forward thinking, then you need to pick a goal and suffer towards it. Like, mine is going to be AI. Like, that's what I'm waiting for. And, if that doesn't work for you, then there's a million other things you could be suffering for. You could be suffering for realistic sex bots. You could be suffering for, the apocalypse that may never come. Like, I would say waiting for things that are deterministic, that are human-led. Like, maybe you're waiting for the AI singularity. Like, all of these things realistically are going to happen at some point. So, maybe, depending on how old you are, even in your lifetime, with the AI singularity, with sex bots, who knows? Like, one can hope, right? And at the same time, new technology is just around the corner, but, going forward, also just protect yourself from the state and the predations of the universe, because, if you are a man in current year, it is imperative that you're as far away from, the government or anything else as you possibly can be. And we're looking at potential drafts here in the States, if things go awry, we're trying to wedge ourselves into global conflict, and, again, the next few elections, just like the last few elections, are fairly important, so, I'm not going to say anything about them as far as, how they've gone, but I think anyone who looks at history will see that, the 2022 election will be very, very much linked to the George Bush election, we'll say. And, if you need to know more than that, you can figure it out yourself. But, it's not going to be very difficult to see how history probably will reflect on these things. And, I could be wrong about that, like the new 1984 style government or the new formulaic dystopia might take over everything, and then, East might be West, and we might be rewriting all of this, but, you'll have lived through it, and at least you'll have a lived and personal experience of it. And we might be the last people alive that ever get to enjoy a lived and personal experience that isn't tainted by, Big Brother watching you, or like the AI sentient overlords, or any of the other possible dystopias that are almost assuredly shortly waiting around the bend. I kid, because at the end of the day, probably nothing will happen, because nothing ever does happen, but, one can only hope. At least that is what I am hoping for, is at least interesting times are ahead. I think that no matter what, even if you're like the lowest of the low, the 0 out of 10, like worthless to everyone, cringe lord himself, you can at least hope for interesting times. And we've had some pretty interesting times as of late, and I must say, I imagine that that's not going to slow down any time soon. The news cycle seems to only be improving, and, who knows? Certainly it's not going to be just, it's not going to be fair, and things that are interesting usually aren't. The universe and world is fair because it's filled with injustice. Like, the universe has no global sense of equality, and that's definitely a good argument against, for instance, religion and a lot of the other practices that we as humans try and prescribe some sort of global equity or some sort of divine judgment, right, or some sort of sense of right and wrong. And at least as far as the greater universe is concerned, that seems to be lacking. But, again, in consciousness and in understanding and in the ability to think forward, we can, relate cause and effect our actions to what we do, and then via that we can ascertain, negative and positive impacts, at least if not only on the universe itself, but especially on ourselves, because we feel it, And sure, you can make the argument that I'm sure the nihilists are thinking, like, the universe dies with me, I'm the only one that exists, and to a certain point I do agree with that. Like, the universe does in fact die with me. There's no reason for me to live for anyone else, which is why I specifically have taken the routes and the things I've done. Like, I am an intensely selfish individual, almost unapologetically selfish, so that probably plays a hand into my distinct lack of the opposite sex in my life. But, it is what it is. It's probably for the better then, and I'm fine with that. I'm sure the rest of the world and the universe is fine with that, because it's very unlikely many people will remember me. Like, I will make a little splash there. I'm hoping to have a little community of individuals, at least around me, that understands and, has at least the same mindset. Even if they don't agree completely, they at least can understand where I'm coming from. And hopefully I can reciprocate, although, it's very hard to understand people sometimes, at least on a level that you're actually understanding them, or, you have some sort of unique knowledge of their individual circumstance and behavior. But yeah, that's a lot to do about nothing, as one would say. And I hope that at least presents some ideas to think about. Like, oh, well, there's actually one thing I would like to say too before I leave you all, and that's about like the nature of suffering in itself. I know there's a lot of people that are like, dude, it's ow, fuck off, dragon. But there's a lot of people that have that stoicism ideal in their head, and that's certainly not what I'm preaching. Like, stoicism is just tyranny against yourself, and at the end of the day, it's useful for some things, but in modern day especially, I don't think it's all of that applicable. I think suffering towards something is, to be selfish is a much better mindset than just, suffering for the global good, or because a leader dictates it, or because it's manly or whatever. Like, stoicism has a few different ways you can reference it depending on what you're talking about, but I think suffering in a selfish sense for your own betterment in the future is perfectly acceptable, and certainly not what I would define as stoicism. So just to make a little differentiation there before I leave and let you wonder why in the world you're listening to some autistic spur rant about loneliness. But that is the loneliness discussion. At least one of them. I might make more, just because more coping methods might come out, and I might want to inform my loyal needs or whatever. Hopefully fellow needs soon. I probably will just end up retiring and calling it good. But yeah. And I probably will go make dinner now, actually, too, because I really would like dinner. I think I'm going to make a tortilla pizza. They're pretty calorie low, and they're really delicious, so I've been very fond of them as of late. I bought these tortillas from the health food store, and they're like 140 calories each, and they're pretty good. And then just some tomato paste and cheese on it, and then that's dinner, at least for me. And then I also have chores to do. Chores. But yeah, thanks for listening, gentlemen, and you have as good a day as you can. Please take good care of your waifu.